These are some of the drawings I did for my earliest YouTube videos. And I'm not saying I wasn't happy with them, but I was aware that they had a fairly stiff and wooden feel to them. I would look at some drawings by other artists which had a looser, more casual feel to the line work and the marks, and wished that I could draw more like that. We're never really happy, are we? But after several years of a lot more drawing and of consciously changing often the way I drew, I do feel a lot more comfortable and happier with the sort of look that my marks, that my line work are producing these days. I feel like I've managed to create a more casual, a more gestural feel to the way I draw, whether it's architecture or trees or a combination, whether they're large structures or small ones, whether it's a domestic scale or a grand one. And I must say, this is one of the drawings I've done which I personally like the best, because it has such a light, casual feel to the lines and the marks. Let me explain what I think are the key things that enabled me to shift from a fairly stiff line work to something which I feel has more feeling to it, more movement, more interest. And if you're wanting to shift your line work from a more rigid looking effect to something that has a little more feeling, maybe some of the ways I've identified have helped change my drawing style could help change yours. Let's start. A really important thing to understand is that how we draw comes from how we think. I think that's pretty much the case with everything, but it certainly includes how we draw. If I want my marks to look more relaxed, more casual when I draw, then I have to be more relaxed, more casual when I draw than how I am currently if my drawing doesn't contain these characteristics. So the question is, what is my mental state when I draw? How relaxed am I? Am I tense, feeling uncertain? Am I fearful of mistakes? Is it a love-hate relationship from start to finish? Because if it is, that's certainly not going to help me produce relaxed, gestural, lively feeling lines and marks. Casual and relaxed marks and lines come from casual and relaxed fingers and wrists and hands and arms and bodies. And these all come from a relaxed mind. Now, we can't just change how we're thinking or feeling with a click of the fingers, but I think it's important to understand that this underlies everything. And this is what we're working towards, actually being relaxed when we draw. And we can feel relaxed about the outcome, whatever it might be. But for me, I think started the key was having a shift in my thinking about what the whole drawing process was about. In my mind, I, bit by bit, began to stop trying to draw lines that define objects that were in my scene. And instead, I began to use marks to create certain visual effects. Effects that I either saw in my reference or in front of me, or that I saw in my imagination coming from my reference material. And as part of this, the emphasis in my thinking in what I was seeing and trying to see shifted from shapes that were outlined to forms that had 3 dimensions and that had a certain visual effect in the context of my scene. So now my finished drawings were not going to be a series of basically outlined shapes that I had to make sure the outlines were exact and precise, but rather an accumulation of a lot of marks, many of which were lines as well, together built an overall effect. And that this is what I was working towards through my drawing process for any particular drawing. And therefore, any one mark or line became a lot less important, because everyone, if you like, didn't have to be a winner, because it was the overall effect I was creating that would count at the end. I began to see that the drawing process wasn't creating a drawing bit by bit, but it was a process of creating a whole drawing that didn't actually happen anywhere until the end. Now, I didn't want to lose the accuracy. We should never mistake gestural for somehow careless, but these lines, if I used them in a drawing, were just the beginning. They weren't the end. I first began to see and perceive and to understand effect versus detail in foliage, in leaves on trees. And then I was also aware of it in terms of depth, of a sense of distance, that things look different when they were far away, and that I wanted to create marks that didn't just capture the shape of the objects, but the effect of them being further away. And at some point, bit by bit maybe, I began to realize that in fact everything was visual effect, and that how the same object might look from scene to scene would often vary. The visual effect would vary because it would be dependent on different things. But generally, the visual effect, the way something looks, can depend on what it's made of, its materials, its edges, whether they're sharp or smooth or rounded or uneven, the surface texture, whether it's polished or rough, the lighting, whether we're in shade or shadow or half shade, whether the light's high in the sky or low in the sky, the condition of something, whether it's new or weathered, whether there are multiple things layered in front that partially obscure what we're seeing. All of these impact the visual effect of that object. And the size of my drawing and the thickness of my pen, they're going to affect the, if you like, visual effect that I'm able to create. My marks and the way I put them together, the number of them that there are, will all need to change as the size of the drawing and the size of the pen change. There's an awful lot of things to juggle in our mind when we're thinking effect. It's a good thing that we all have creative minds. Let me list in a bit more detail, more specifically, some of the actual changes in the way I drew, beyond just the way I thought, which in my mind led to the ongoing, continuous, bit by bit shift in how I drew and the sorts of drawings that I finished up with. It really started because I began to draw freehand. I cut loose from grids and from pencil underlines and from erasers. I cut loose from all those things so that my focus wasn't on so much preventing mistakes as putting marks on the paper and arranging them to create something, to create the drawing that I had in my imagination, based usually on my reference. By having no way back from any mark I put on the paper, I always had to keep going forward. It shifted the way I thought fundamentally. I couldn't keep retreating because it didn't seem right or good enough. I had to always find a way and push on. I was never going to swim the way I wanted to, tied to the life buoy. It might have kept me safe, but it actually stopped me going from where I wanted to end up. Can I say, even if you draw in pencil, and that's great, graphite's an amazing medium, but even if you draw in pencil, you can still choose not to use an eraser. You can still choose not to get one out and not to go and get it, but to push on and work through and use, in the end, every mark you put on the paper. So we have to learn not to let things that don't immediately look as though they've turned out the way we've wanted stop us from pushing on. We need to have a mindset that we keep going, because by learning to embrace mistakes, let's call them, and to learn that most of the time we barely, if at all, notice them, by the end we start to relax about making them. And that's the only way we learn to relax, when we actually make them, push on, and discover that they haven't caused whatever calamity at the end we were afraid they were going to. In fact, I learned that I've got the creative ability to think and to come up with new things and to add things that I hadn't thought of, and to make those marks, wrong as they felt they were at the start, simply part of the overall finished drawing. These are the ways I help my mind relax. These are the ways I stop being so fearful, because fear will always make us rigid and tense, and none of these things are going to work very well with trying to develop a relaxed and animated style of drawing. I would say that developing the confidence to push on to the end with every drawing is one of the most important skills we can develop on our drawing journey. all of these things are far more, if you like, challenging and important than the technical skills, the how to draw a straight line that we so often focus on. The next group of things that I want to talk about in terms of developing a more relaxed attitude to drawing, and therefore being able to relax more when we draw and to embrace the sort of process we need in our drawing to develop a more gestural, a more lively, less wooden looking style, really for me have been made more concrete in this series that I'm producing at the moment of 10-minute real-time drawing videos, where I've been choosing topics that I feel like I've got a chance to draw in real time in 10 to 15 minutes, because it's meant that every day for the last 2 months, whatever else I've drawn, I've done this series of drawings under certain conditions that are quite different to the sorts of conditions I've drawn in up till now. And I believe the experience of these drawings has helped me understand, but also to develop further in my own drawing, the conditions that create a more animated, relaxed drawing style. And the first of these is the incredible benefit of drawing on a smaller scale. It's made me realize what a mistake it is when we're starting to draw, when we're more at the beginning end of our drawing journey than the end, to start drawing large scale drawings, large sheets of paper. It slows down our learning ability so much. But one of the benefits of drawing on a smaller scale, so I'm drawing on quarter A4 sheets of paper, is that I can see the whole drawing easily. I don't have to roam my eyes back and forth. Whatever effect I'm creating, I can see it all as easily as possible, and that makes my understanding of what's happening as fast and easy as possible. And remember, everything in the end comes from our thinking, comes from our mind. The more easily I can perceive what's happening, both in my reference, so it's good to make that smaller rather than larger as well, and also in my drawing, will increase the effectiveness of the whole process. And a smaller size drawing, of course, is easier to finish in 10 or 15 minutes. And if I'm confident that I will draw this in 10 or 15 minutes, then suddenly the pressure is off me because, well, if it doesn't work out, I can do it again. It's not as if I've spent 2 or 3 or 4 hours or 3 2-hour drawing sessions producing the one thing. And I feel like I can't wreck it because then I've wasted all of these hours. This is not conducive to a relaxed mindset, and the tension, even out and out fear that I feel, is going to be transferred from my mind down my arm into my hand and fingers and through the pen onto the paper. It will not help me to develop a gestural style of drawing. Reducing the risk is a great way to be less fearful about taking the risk, and a smaller scale drawing lets us do that. In a similar vein, if we want to develop a more gestural style of drawing, we'll make it easier for us to do so. Again, because it helps us relax more. There are less things to juggle all at once. I need to draw things that I have a reasonable chance of drawing well, because in the end, I learn by drawing well, learn and develop the style I want when my drawings turn out the way I'm hoping they will. And there's best chance of that when the drawing subjects aren't too advanced for my ability. It is not helpful to let our enthusiasm run away with us when we choose what we're going to draw. And if I know I have a reasonable chance of drawing this particular subject mostly well, maybe there's some element that will push me a bit, but generally I know I have a chance of reaching a good result. Then I will be more relaxed and I'm more likely to end up with that better result. Setting a time limit has been tremendously helpful for me, I think, to develop a more gestural style. Now, because I'm mostly drawing these days for a video, and because there's a limit to how long the videos can be, and there's a limit to how many times the one video can be sped up, that enforces a time limit on me. There is a certain tempo, a certain pace, a certain rhythm that I have to develop in the course of one drawing and maintain through the drawing. I can't start to slow down and start to fall back into old habits of overlooking, overthinking, starting to be afraid of things not being correct, becoming precious and trying to protect perhaps half a drawing that looks okay, but now I'm afraid that In the next half, I'll wreck it, so I start to become tighter and more constrained as I become more fearful. None of those things are possible if we really force ourselves to work to a rhythm that's not determined by our fear, by our perfectionism. And I think that's the key thing. When I say I'm going to put my pen down in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, then the rhythm, the pace of my drawing is now not determined by my fear. It's not determined by thinking I'm going to make mistakes or by taking a lot of time endlessly erasing and correcting mistakes. It forces me to change my mindset. It only works though if I stick to it. In effect, what I'm doing is I'm making all of my drawing sessions less of a big deal. I'm doing everything I can to take the pressure off me or not allow myself to develop this sort of pressure that starts to tighten the way I think and the way my body moves when I draw, and therefore the sorts of lines and marks I create. So smaller, simpler, and faster all set me up for a state of mind that has more chance of releasing my confidence and not having a place to let the fear and the anxiety and the tension about anything to do with my drawing develop. And of course, as I say quite a lot these days, part of this is to stop thinking that I'm producing an artwork and to have the mindset I'm learning to draw, and these are drawing exercises. And one of the things I'm learning to do is to develop a more casual, gestural way of drawing, something that contains more life, more animation. And can I say, having the artwork mentality is often what pushes us to draw things that are beyond our ability on a scale, a size that is not helpful, because we somehow feel that it needs to look impressive at the end, because that's what artworks do. That's what the drawings that we like look like. That's what the drawings of the artists who've inspired us look like. And so we feel that that's what we have to be trying to do. But it's not a helpful way to learn. And if I really have the mindset that I'm learning, not producing artworks, then it becomes so much easier to take risks. In fact, I can very easily appreciate the fact that I need to take risks, measured risks, risks that we have a chance of working out in order to learn. We should never not do something simply because we're afraid it won't work out in some way. Now, that's probably applicable to almost all of life anyway, but it does particularly apply to our drawing, because it will certainly never work out for us if we don't learn to do it. It's this awareness that every bit of paper that I get out and I put my pen on or my pencil on is a learning journey. And I learn sometimes by falling over and getting up again, but being a little more aware of how I have to balance so I don't fall over again the next step I take. Just as it doesn't matter if I hit a wrong note in my piano practice, it doesn't matter if I get some marks or lines in an unhelpful place in my drawing practice. The way we think is so important with what we do and how it's going to look. And when I shift the way I think, the way I understand the process, when I structure my drawing sessions in ways that make it as easy as possible to take risks and to learn, then I allow my mind to relax more, which allows my body to relax more, which allows the lines and marks I make to look more relaxed, more animated, to have more life. And it allows me to experiment more because I'm learning and I want to learn. And I know that experimentation and sometimes pushing boundaries is how that's going to happen. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope this has been helpful. It's certainly been my desire over the last few years to develop a more gestural, a more animated drawing style, to be less focused on worrying about mistakes and more focused on bringing the whole scene together for a certain effect at the end. And if that's something you would like to do with the way your drawings look, then I hope this has been helpful for you. But look, whatever you draw, however you think as you draw, however it turns out, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.